longer. I just want to, yes, forgot to do that. Okay. That there are difficult issues in housing in this community. And not too long ago, we had a meeting, and one of the issues that we have faced over the years has been small dollar loans. A woman who lived in the Buckeye Woodland neighborhood had been in her home for a year and couldn't get out because she didn't have handrails to go down the stairs. And there are hundreds of homes throughout Greater Cleveland that don't have adequate loans to help with their furnace, their gutters, their roofs, things that make a difference in people's lives. Unfortunately, you don't have ribbon cuttings for those events. There are no big events. There's no shovels. There's no ribbon to cut. There's no TV cameras. There's people who are suffering because they can't get a loan to repair their house. And so today we're going to hear from the candidates. We're going to hear their solutions to problems. And I'm so pleased to have the Dean of the College of Urban Affairs with us today, Dean Roland Anglin. And he comes to us from Rutgers University. His PhD is from the University of Chicago. And highlighting his career, probably one of the most important phone calls you could probably ever get is from the Ford Foundation. And he was there for a number of years handing out grants for community development. And the Dean will be the one who's going to be moderating this. We put together a series of questions, and direct your chat questions as we get to the end of this into the chat area. And so we'll have an opportunity to answer your questions, and Frank Ford will be directing those questions and take them from Justin and Kevin Kelley. So without further ado, let's begin with the Dean.
Well, thank you, Mr. Bromley. And I want to thank the coalition for asking me to moderate this very important conversation. Just to talk a little bit about the forum format. Each candidate will be given 5 minutes to introduce themselves and to also give a brief overview related to the topics provided. We wanted to be fair and equitable in deciding who goes first, and we settled on, we will do it alphabetically. So Justin Bibb will go first, and Kevin Kelley will follow. The initial questions were for this conversation were created by the planning committee, and each candidate will be given 2 minutes to respond at the appropriate time. You heard about the questions and answers from the audience. So with no further ado, why don't we get started with each candidate giving 5 minutes to introduce themselves. Justin, Mr. Bibb.
Thank you, Dean Anglin, and to all the organizers for putting together this robust conversation on the future of housing and community development in Cleveland. I'm looking forward to the dialogue. I'm a native son of the Southeast Side, born and raised on 121st in Dove, and I've seen through my own lived experience as a kid, a working class kid from the Southeast Side, the importance of having a home, always having a home I could go to. And I'm really looking forward to truly, as we come out of this pandemic, really make sure City Hall is better well positioned to make sure that we have broad-based community development across our city. But before we can achieve that potential, I believe we got to do a better job in the city of getting back to the basics. Number one, we got to do the hard work of lowering crime, but also making sure we have more police reform and police accountability. Number two, everything that we do in the city government really hinges on having a more modern and responsive City Hall that better supports our seniors, better invest in young people, and better support small businesses because they are the backbone of our local economy and education. We can't grow our tax base and grow our population without a world-class education system. And far too many of our young people don't have the skills they need to compete and be ready for college work and life in the 21st century as they graduate from CMSD. So we must focus like a laser on improving public education. And then lastly, we have an historic opportunity with the American Rescue Plan to make some big, bold, transformational investments in our city. Everything from eradicating the lead paint crisis to finally closing the digital divide. And so we can't afford to lose this moment. And I believe we need some bold, new, dynamic, visionary leadership to do it. And that's why I'm in this race to become the next mayor of Cleveland. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bibb. Council President Kelley.
Thank you, Dean Anglin. Thank you to the planning committee and everybody that's on this call. These are extremely important issues that we're talking about. And a little bit about myself first. My name is Kevin Kelley. I'm the president of Cleveland City Council. I've been president for 8 years. And I am a husband. I am a father of 5 daughters. And I look at everything through the lens in terms of how do certain policy decisions affect families. I've been a victim of foreclosure when I was younger. I know what housing instability is, and it's something that I've been working on as a member of Cleveland City Council and as president of Cleveland City Council for as long as I've been on council. Mr. Bromley started talking about the lack of services and grants that are available for people that are struggling to stay in their homes. Well, we recognize that, and we put in place programs that were not available previously. We put in place the age-friendly home investment program. We know that people are suffering. We also know that a lot of people are prohibited from participating in a lot of programs because their income might just be a little bit too high. But I don't know any people that are living on Social Security who believe that their income is too high, that they shouldn't be able to qualify for programs. But if you look at, what have we done? We recognize in Cleveland City Council the challenges that housing instability presents to families, to streets, to communities. And we've taken steps. If you look at what have we done to provide right to counsel for indigent defendants facing eviction, the money that we put forth to Cleveland CHN Housing Partners for eviction prevention to make sure whether it was utilities, whether it was actual rental, what do we need to do to prevent eviction? Because I believe and I know that eviction is both a symptom and a cause of poverty. And these are the things that we have worked hard to eradicate. And I don't need to tell anybody on this call that the change that we're talking about is hard to do. It doesn't just happen. The simple act of putting together the age-friendly home investment program, by the time you've got to get contractors lined up, you've got to come up with criteria, you have to put money in place. It takes time. Right to counsel. This isn't a program. We declared a right. Once you do that, you can't go back. So, we've bound future mayors and future council presidents and future council members to this idea that if you're a low-income person facing eviction, you have a right to representation in eviction court. That's something that's going to last long beyond the time that I'm in government. But I look forward to the discussion because these are the issues that really build communities and are really critical for our future.
Thank you both. The first question, let's start with Mr. Bibb. Rental assistance. Councilman Kelley spoke a little bit about that. But cities around the country are struggling to get emergency rental assistance into the hands of renters facing eviction. And Cleveland has one of the most effective and efficient systems in place to deliver these funds. How will you ensure that emergency rental assistance funds continue to flow promptly and steadily to this system? Mr. Bibb?
Well, Dean, you mentioned that the city of Cleveland has pretty solid operations and processes around getting rental assistance out on the streets, but I think we can do a bit better with this. Just a couple of days ago, I talked to Senator Sherrod Brown just about this issue and how HUD and the Senate Housing and Banking Committee is really looking at additional programs for localities to make sure we can address some of the pain points that many of our residents experience day in and day out. The other thing I would say is we need to do a better job inside the city in terms of being more flexible with how we commit some of these capital dollars that are allocated from HUD and other agencies. And then I would also say this, one of the things I've experienced in this community over the last decade or so when talking to residents in the city is many residents don't know where to go to for programs. And so I believe that by having a more modern and responsive city hall that can better address these information gaps and connect many of our particularly seniors to the right programs, it would allow us to make sure that these dollars can get out on the street in a more effective way. And then also continuing to build on a great existing partnerships with organizations like Cleveland Neighborhood Progress and the Cleveland Housing Network as well, to make sure we're going above and beyond at the city to be more agile and responsive to the needs of all of our residents.
Thank you. Council President Kelley, same question.
Thank you. Rental assistance is critical. Preventing eviction is critical. You can talk about programs that might come from HUD, but we took a different approach. We're not waiting for HUD. We're not waiting for the feds to come in. This is a crisis that was affecting Cleveland. That's why we put money immediately to Cleveland Housing, CHN Housing Partners, and we worked with United Way to form the Housing Justice Alliance. This is all tied into Right to Counsel to make sure that we as a community are doing everything that we can to prevent eviction, to prevent people from being put on the streets. Because you got to remember what happens when you put somebody on the streets. When somebody loses their home, more times than not, a child loses their school. More times than not, people have to find a new way to get to work. They have to rearrange their lives. This is a critical thing. This isn't a time to be talking about waiting for programs from HUD. HUD is challenging to work with, but that's why we took it and we went elsewhere. That's why we took the age-friendly home investment program and we took it out of community development and we put it in the Department of Aging because we know that we can get the money out quicker. There's less restrictions. We made it general fund dollars. This is too important to just talk about. This is something where we need to look at actions that have been taken. We need to look at actions that we can continue to take. And this is not a theoretical problem. This is a real problem. This is something that we as a council, I as council president, have taken extremely serious. And it's not just something I've talked about. It's something I put money behind. I built programming behind, and I'm going to continue to do that because I believe that housing insecurity threatens families, threatens streets, threatens communities. And I will continue down this path of making sure that rental assistance and any program to keep people in their houses is expanded and that we're reaching every Clevelander.
Thank you. Let's go to the next question. In many Cleveland neighborhoods, blight from abandoned homes continues to undermine housing values and prevent the recovery of lost homeowner equity, especially for African-American homeowners. Given the fact that there are 3,000 blighted or condemned and abandoned structures, with 80% of those on the east side of Cleveland, how would you address the significant loss of African-American home equity? Mr. Bibb, why don't we start with you again?
Well, listen, this is personal for me. My housing value where I grew up on 121st and Dove, we have not recovered since 2008. And over the last 2 decades, we haven't seen a sense of urgency from this administration and council leadership on making sure that we bring back the southeast side of the city. Because until we can bring back the southeast side, I do not think this city can be a city of opportunity that can work for everybody. So I think we got to do a couple things. Number one, every cent of this money that we should be spending with the American Rescue Plan should be viewed with a truly equitable lens in terms of inclusive economic development. If I were mayor, I would have worked with council already to build a strategy to leverage this capital, and a large share of that capital should be committed to direct housing investments, particularly in the southeast side, with a targeted strategy to remove the blight that exists, because it's a shame that we continue to see this being an issue in the city of Cleveland. Secondly, we got to do a better job of bringing our banking partners around the table. I believe we should have a broad-based commission and with the key set of community stakeholders, working with Key Bank, Third Federal, PNC, et cetera, to make sure that Community Reinvestment Act dollars are truly tied to address the redlining that has plagued many of our communities for far too long. And the mayor must be in a position to use the bully pulpit of that office to eradicate this issue, particularly when it comes to home ownership, because as you know, home ownership is one of the biggest things we can do in this country to build wealth, and we need to make this a focused strategy in the city of Cleveland for the future.
Councilman Kelley.
Thank you. We can't underestimate the loss in wealth that happened with the last housing crisis and the foreclosure crisis that happened. I own a home. I've owned 3 homes, and I know what's happened to my values and people that live in Cleveland neighborhoods. It is critical. It is painful, but we have to do more than talk about platitudes and important things. We need to figure out what is the path forward. And we can come up with slogans and all, but we got to figure out what's the path. Right now, data is very clear that if we get ahead of if we get on track with our demo curve and knock down that's currently on our demo list, I believe there's closer to 4,000 homes that are on the demo list. We know that if we eliminate that blight, that will improve the property values in the surrounding community. So we need to commit to taking down all those vacant and abandoned homes that are on the demo list currently. We need to make sure that work is done by Cleveland companies, and we need to continue to look at the different anti-blight programs that we have. We need to take care of the vacant and abandoned lots that we have. The path has to be, if we're going to restore, we have to first eliminate blight, and then we have to encourage development. And that is something that's going to happen with the Middle Neighborhoods Initiative, where we put $1 million, the first $1 million, and we're told that there's more money coming, but I'll believe it when I see it, for coming up with a loan loss reserve fund for underserved neighborhoods where, if there's an issue with your down payment gap, your appraisal gap, it's going to give the private sector confidence. Because let's just face it, the banks have failed us. The private sector has failed us. And if you look at I like to point to the Glen Village development as an example. Everything that planners look for, traffic counts, average income, average purchasing power of the surrounding neighborhoods, it was all there before the city bonded dollars to basically form a fund to protect the investment. We shouldn't have had to do that, but we did. But hopefully that proves that every neighborhood is a good investment, and we really need to, drive that home and make sure that we do our part in eliminating blight, and then we demand investments in our underserved neighborhoods.
Thanks, Council President. You mentioned the private sector and banks. Let's turn to the Community Reinvestment Act compliance. In 1990, Cleveland became the first city in the country to leverage its deposits at banks to get banks to pledge to increase lending in underserved neighborhoods. But for 30 years, those agreements have been kept from the public and treated as trade secrets. They're immune from public records requests. Cuyahoga County has recently entered into a similar agreement with a major bank, but made the bank's commitments publicly accessible. Do you believe that bank agreements should be public? Let's start with you, Council President Kelley.
Yes, absolutely. I believe everything that happens in the city needs to be public, and that's why I'm supporting an open data model of how we store and provide records when I'm mayor. But we really have to look at, the right now is an opportunity to really look at that agreement. One of the challenges of the agreement is during tight budget times, the value of our depository accounts, our general fund accounts, didn't have the leverage that we did, because we were taking it out as soon as we were putting it in. So that quick revolving general fund, because we were living very close to the vest, was very challenging. But now that there are ARPA dollars, now that we have some unencumbered cash, now is the time to really make sure that we are demanding investment in our neighborhoods as the Community Reinvestment Act prescribes, and it absolutely needs to be open to the public.
Mr. Bibb, same question.
I completely agree. I alluded to this in my prior comments. We need better mechanisms at the local level to track these investments and dollars, to hold our banking partners accountable. As we enter into agreements with our banking partners, we need to use those deals to make sure we're leveraging those banking relationships to maximize the ROI for our residents. And when you think about the fact that in many parts of the city, you're redlined out from being able to afford or get access to a quality mortgage product. You're redlined out from being able to get access to capital for a loan to start a business. And even on the insurance side, many homeowners that I've talked to are even redlined out from the home insurance market. And so we got to do a better job of just disrupting the financial service ecosystem in Northeast Ohio to make sure that our banking partners and our CDFIs as well are doing their part to make sure they're working with the city to eradicate these inequities that we see in terms of access to equitable financial service products.
Thank you. Let's get to a big problem, delinquent property taxes. There are over 29,000 residential parcels in the county with delinquent property tax balances. Almost half of these, 48%, are located in majority African-American communities on the east side of Cleveland. how would you, and let's start with Mr. Bibb, how would you address this challenge of helping delinquent properties?
Well, I think the county has made some good steps in the right direction with some of their personal outreach to delinquent taxpayers through their work with the prosecutor's office and the fiscal office and other foreclosure counseling agencies. I think through that work, they've collected about $15 million in delinquent taxes, and have also helped decrease tax foreclosures. And so I think the mayor has to work intentionally with the county executive and county council to ensure we can be a good faith partner in that work. I think we also should be exploring some additional programs as well for those folks that are struggling to pay their taxes, to pay a moderate amount of those taxes so they can stay in their home or, you know, still keep that property in their family, because we all know what happens when you fall on hard times. The other thing I would say is, in terms of just overall tax pain and tax liability, you know, it's past time that we reevaluate our tax abatement policy and explore long-term homeowner property tax relief programs in the city of Cleveland. A great model that I've studied well and talked to other mayors about is the model out of Philly called the Loop program. And I intend to work with our governor and state legislature come next January to make sure that's a program we can explore in the city of Cleveland.
Thank you, Mr. Bibb. I would ask our audience to stay on mute. Council President Kelley.
Thank you. The issue of delinquent taxes, it harms people in an inequitable way. But what we have to look at is, first off, the first thing we need to do is we do need to collect taxes from those landlords that are allowing it to slide depending on the value of the property. What we have to work with the county on is, where it becomes inequitable, is we have to do a better job of determining which of these liens are sold. There was a time when they were selling these tax liens, and the ones they were selling, of course, are the ones that had the value. So if you were a homeowner that owned your property and you were struggling to keep up, you kept your property at a certain level, it was pretty good. So, but that lien was therefore more valuable to sell. And that's where foreclosures against homeowners happened. But we need to start by making sure that any property owner in the city of Cleveland is current on the tax, on their tax bill. That's something we can't have flexibility with. But then for those homeowners that are struggling to make ends meet, we have to make sure that we can't be selling off tax liens. We got to work with the county to make sure that there is a better way, a more equitable way to collect the taxes, but without putting people into foreclosure, without having the Board of Revisions foreclosure process happen. We have to make sure that we are using the authority of the county properly to collect the dollars, but also be compassionate to those people that have put their time and life and energy into their property. And on the Loop program that was mentioned earlier, that's something that Senator Sandra Williams has already introduced. I've sponsored a resolution supporting it, and I'm looking forward to that becoming law.
Thank you both. Let's move to tenant protections. Local housing advocates and policy experts are advocating for a specific set of renter protections that could be implemented on your first day in office or your first 100 days. Are you supportive of SOI protections, pay to stay, and other needed renter protections addressing discriminations in housing access? Let's start with Mr. Bibb.
Absolutely. We know that the majority of tenants experiencing evictions in Cleveland are people of color, and particularly Black women with children. And so I believe that source of income protection and pay to stay legislation are critical to address this need on the short-term basis. Secondly, I want to applaud Council President Kelley and the council for passing the right to counsel legislation and enacted that program with the Legal Aid Society. I think it was a good step in the right direction. However, the problem that we have now is that about 62% of those who show up to housing court aren't eligible. And so I think we got to do a better job of exploring the eligibility of that program and maybe using the ARPA dollars as a way to fill that gap long term. And then lastly, you know, I've been calling out Holton Wise since the start of this election, and they are one of many predatory landlords we got to crack down on in the city of Cleveland, because many of these landlords are racist, and they are calling communities where I grew up and call home slumlords and ghetto zones, and it's a shame. And this behavior should not be tolerated in the city of Cleveland. And once elected, I'm going to make sure that the buck's going to stop with me and hold them accountable.
Council President.
Thank you. We've been fighting with Holton Wise for a long time. They are not good actors in the housing business. They come into communities and they purchase up homes where they see vulnerability. And we've seen too much purchase of assets, of properties by the Holton Wise of the world, especially during the prior recession when property values plummeted. And, you know, as you go forward, that's where you get the conditions that we get in our neighborhoods and what we need to do to move forward. Source of income legislation is something that's being considered by the council, working through the legal issues of, you know, does a property owner have to enter into a contract with a housing agreement? There's a couple nuances. It's not quite as simple as it sounds, but as far as making sure that we are addressing housing discrimination, if you advertise no Section 8 or no veterans benefits, you know, that's something that I absolutely support. And we need to find a way to, you know, do this in a way that's targeted to where the problem is and doesn't bring other unintended consequences. But we've really, I think that, you know, when we look at discrimination housing, we look at housing stability in the city of Cleveland. I think that we have taken tremendous steps forward, but with what COVID has shown us is that, you know, the people that were hurting before COVID are hurting more now. When I see lines for people lining up for the food bank, I'm quite certain they're not having an easy time making their rent. So we just really need to keep focused on this problem.
Thank you both. Access to credit for small dollar home repair is vital to community stabilization. What would you do to encourage or ensure Cleveland residents living in underserved neighborhoods will receive small dollar loans for the repair of their homes related to things like furnaces, porches, and gutters? Let's start with Council President Kelley.
Thank you, Dean. This is absolutely critical to our housing stock and really people's lives. When we looked at, you know, what can we do as a city to improve, you know, people's lives, we realized that the programs that we have are very restrictive in terms of income, in terms of, you know, a lot of seniors, for example, when they reach a certain age, they will do smart estate planning and put a home in a child's name. Well, that eliminates their eligibility for most of the programs that we have. So what we really looked at is we need to not just come up with another loan program. We need to come up with a grant program, a small dollar grant program. And that's what the Age-Friendly Home Investment Program is. That is a $10,000 grant, not a loan, for roof repair, for sidewalk repair, for porch repair, for painting, anything that you need to keep your house up to code. I bring that program up to say that it's a great program. It's served hundreds of Cleveland residents, $10,000 at a time, but it's a model of what we can do to build on. This is the path that we need to be. Maybe, you know, it doesn't have to be seniors. We can raise the income eligibility and make sure that this programs like this are available for every Clevelander that needs it, because any person who invests in their home is improving their property values. And they're improving their property value to their neighbors, to the left and to the right, and their street. And it's keeping the community stronger. So an investment in one's home, these small dollar grants to me are critical to the health of neighborhoods. I know how important they are to the people that have used them. And I intend to use the Age-Friendly Home Investment Program as a model of how we expand that and take different, you know, qualifying factors, maybe not being a senior, income guidelines, and expanding it to more Clevelanders.
Mr. Bibb?
Well, there's some low-hanging fruit currently around this. Right now, Cleveland only spent about a half of its money that we got from HUD last year, and other cities are spending at least 80% of the money they've gotten from HUD to improve housing conditions. And so we need to do a better job of restructuring our economic and community development departments to better use HUD funding to improve housing conditions in the city of Cleveland. Secondly, I've talked to many homeowners about this issue, particularly seniors, where they don't make enough to be able to afford an equity line of credit to improve their home, or they make too much that they can't qualify for a home repair grant from the city of Cleveland. And so you have this gap in terms of who can actually benefit and who's eligible, that I think we need to reassess to make sure we can expand a program and make it more targeted for those who need the dollars that they need to improve their homes. And it's going to require more partnerships with our banking partners and CDFIs and credit unions to make sure we can help work with them to fill that funding gap for many of our residents. I would also say we need to do a better job of incubating contractors and home repair organizations inside the city of Cleveland to better supply the workforce needed to upgrade these homes. This could be a great boon for local job creation as well, and that must be on the table to make sure we're addressing the entire supply chain of this problem.
Okay, can you hear it?
Great. Well, we're at the portion of the conversation where we're going to allow you, the audience, to ask some questions. And I'm going to ask Frank Ford to moderate this portion of the debate. Frank, could you read the questions in the chat and designate who you'd like to answer the question? Should come off mute,
Yes,
Frank.
I was muted. Sorry. Some people prefer that I be muted, but not right now. I'm going to do these one at a time. Excuse me. And I think, did we say that these could be, should each candidate have a chance to ask them? Most of them are to both. There's maybe only one or two that are directed at a specific candidate.
Let's ask the candidates the questions and give them both an opportunity to answer.
Okay, thanks. So the first question is, how will you create an 18-hour city? And for those who don't know, this is a term of art. 24-hour cities are considered to be the 6 major cities: New York, San Francisco, LA, Boston. And the question is really, how do you create Cleveland? How can it be an alternative, attractive place to those 24-hour cities?
Mr. Bibb, why don't you go first?
Well, I love this question, but before we can get to an 18-hour city, we got to get to a 15-minute city. So what does that mean? Well, it means that every investment decision we make in this city, regardless if you're making it in Mount Pleasant or in West Park, it needs to be made with this construct of, is it going to create an environment where there's a grocery store within 15 minutes that sells fresh fruits and vegetables? Is that investment going to create the ability of having a job you can walk to or get to within 15 minutes? Is there a quality park that's well lit, programmed, and safe with great trees, and to make sure that your residents can achieve the kind of freedom that they want in terms of accessing public spaces? And if we can make that our North Star of how we plan from an urban planning perspective, I think long-term, we can get to this spot where we can be an 18-hour city, but it's gonna require, I think, a very cohesive focus on making sure we continue to put people in neighborhoods first all across this community.
Council President.
Thank you. There are no, silver bullets or magic formulas of creating an 18-hour city or whatever. We just have to look at how are we spending our investment dollars? What are we doing to encourage investment in the city of Cleveland, entertainment options in the city of Cleveland? We have to looking at what we've lost from COVID, especially in terms of entertainment opportunities, venues, those things that did keep us, up not 24 hours, but close to the 18-hour level. Are we making sure that we are supporting the restaurants that struggled and are barely hanging on right now during COVID? Are we supporting the street level retail? Are we supporting those small businesses, which really are the fabric of our neighborhoods? People enjoy the amenities of their neighborhood, and these small businesses, these are the ones that got hurt the most. We have to make sure that we are supporting them. And if we really want to get to a point where Cleveland has a robust economy and a job market that's going to continue to expand, we have to do a better job training our citizens. We have to make sure that that training and educating our citizens, excuse me, for the jobs that are available right now. You know, there are hundreds of thousands of high-paying jobs available right now, but we are not properly training and educating our citizens to take them. We need to make sure that we are feeding the economy that needs people as much as people need opportunities. That's going to get you to a point where businesses can see growth. That's where we're going to see more businesses opening up in Cleveland when we have that mix of the right workforce and opportunities that are working together to grow our economy. But in the short term, we just need to support those small businesses, those amenities that make our neighborhood strong.
Thank
Terrific.
you.
Frank,
Yes.
next question.
Yep. The next question is, how will you increase the tax base? And I believe, although they didn't say this, I think, assuming they mean the property tax base, and they're asking for specifics.
Let's go with Mr. Bibb.
Okay.
You go first this time again.
Go ahead, Council President.
Okay, thank you. How do we increase tax base? So there are many ways that we need to get there. As I mentioned before, we need to start by taking down those vacant abandoned properties that are dragging our property values down. I am particularly focused on this issue because this is one of those issues that the city of Cleveland didn't create, yet we are called upon to solve this issue. When the foreclosure crisis happened, when the last recession happened, we didn't make any money in predatory lending. We didn't bundle any of these loans and sell them as, you know, as securities. That was other people that came into our community and did that and left us with these vacant abandoned homes and the people that were left suffering in its wake. So we need to start by eliminating blight in our neighborhoods. And that is the first step. And then we need to reinvest by the programs that we talked about in terms of giving people opportunities to invest in their own homes and making sure that there are tools available to homeowners that want to improve the value of their homes, that want to improve the quality of their neighborhoods, of their own lives. And again, we can never stop doing what we can to be a welcoming city. We need to create a little more demand for our housing. I think right now is a wonderful opportunity to really open up and double down and extend our outreach to immigrant and refugee communities. That's how a lot of cities have really stabilized their population. But it's got to be let's take the blight down. Let's invest in homes. Let's increase our population. And again, let's strengthen our economy. And the best way to do that is through better training and educating of our citizens, training people, educating people for the jobs that are available now. I hope that's specific enough. I've got more.
Mr. Bibb, do you want to take a crack at it?
Yeah, I mean, listen, the biggest reason why we've seen a declining population loss and declining tax base is that, you know, our leadership has been asleep at the wheel for nearly 16 years. We have the lowest population in the city since the 1800s. And for us to grow our population and grow our tax base, we got to do what other mid-sized cities across the country have done. Focus like a laser on getting back to the basics. So number one, no one's going to come here if they don't feel safe. So we got to lower crime, invest in our officers, and make sure we invest in a comprehensive public safety approach to address the root cause of violent crime and trauma in our communities. That's first and foremost. Secondly, we are one of the hardest cities in the state to do business with. So you have small businesses going to Stowe and Hudson and not starting in Cleveland because they can't get their phone call returned in time, or the permitting process is 20 years outdated. You look at our website, it's still stuck in the early 2000s. And then public education. When I talk to CEOs who want to invest in Northeast Ohio, they say, we won't invest until you upskill your workforce to meet the demands of a 21st century knowledge-based economy. So the next mayor must use the bully pulpit of that office to better connect K-12 education with workforce development, to start teaching our children in elementary school and middle school about the jobs of the future so they have a straight to work pipeline when they graduate. But it's all about getting back to the basics. That's how we grow our population in the future.
Frank, do you have the next question for us?
Yes. What are some specific ways you plan to address homelessness and lack of affordable housing in Cleveland?
Council President, why don't you take
Thank you. Homelessness is an issue that I've been involved with ever since I graduated from college for my first days at the Westside Catholic Center. And I've been involved in multiple efforts to expand permanent supportive housing, and there is more demand for permanent supportive housing. The area that we should all focus on in terms of really getting to zero functional homelessness is how do we deal with the unsheltered homeless? How do we reach out and get results from those that, despite our best efforts, don't want shelter on those bitter cold nights? They're not interested in the programming that's available. That is a challenge that we need to solve. And I've been, the Sisters of Charities Foundation has been champions in this. And I do think that there is a solution. I do think we can get to zero functional homelessness. We just really have to put all of our efforts into this unsheltered homeless population and just really try to figure out how do we better communicate with them? How do we meet them where they are? And how do we really reach out to them to bring them into whether it's a shelter, whether it's permanent supportive housing, but basically out of the danger of the cold, out of the danger of being hungry. How do we really, make a honest, achievable outreach and connection with this community?
Mr. Bibb?
I think the city has to be a more aggressive partner with the county to address the homelessness issue we have throughout our community. Number one, we should be deploying a housing first policy versus making people stay in a shelter and prove they're chronically homeless before they get a housing voucher. To me, that doesn't make a lot of sense. The other thing I would say is this: in many cases, the root cause of homelessness in this city is the lack of adequate mental health care in our community. We currently don't have a robust mental health clinic in the city of Cleveland. And I think if we did have that, it would go a long way to making sure that our homeless brothers and sisters get the support and counseling that they need to get back on their feet so they can have a pathway to have a middle-class life and a life with dignity. And to your question about affordable housing, this is where I think we could be really retooling and using our abatement policy in a more prudent way to encourage and incent more affordable and workforce housing all across this community to make sure that folks can live with dignity and can be in a home that they can afford and build long-term wealth in the city of Cleveland.
Next question is from someone who says they are a recent transplant from Arlington, Virginia and Washington, D.C. What are your plans to develop the many vacant lots and abandoned buildings? And they have a follow-up question. Have you considered raising taxes on the derelict properties?
Why don't we start with Mr. Bibb?
Well, one big idea I have around our abandoned lots is really being more aggressive in the city of Cleveland about community solar and building solar farms in our communities where we have many abandoned lots that can not only be a jobs generator for residents, it's also a great generator of wealth creation in our neighborhoods, but it also, if we're able to get out of this 50-year contract with AMP at Cleveland Public Power, it could be the pathway for us to use renewable sources to fuel CPP versus relying on fossil fuels like we currently do right now. That should be one of our main priorities as we think about how to make sure those abandoned lots could be used in a more prudent way long term.
Council President?
Thank you. All those ideas have been considered, but you can't forget the notion that if you do solar, the further you are away from where it's going to be transmitted, you lose a tremendous amount of power along the way. And then you have to ask the question, is this something that you want next to your home? Is this part of the neighborhood? I think what we need to do is look at what real estate is available for the type of housing that people are looking for. A number of neighborhoods are built out. On the east side of Cleveland, if we were to take down these 4,000 vacant abandoned homes, in addition to the vacant lots that are available, we have an opportunity to really incent and encourage development on the east side of Cleveland and build the type of housing products that people are looking for. I was very happy in my 1,200 square foot bungalow with 1.5 baths for a long time until my daughters started reaching their teenage years. And then we had to look for something else. But there just weren't a lot of 2 or 3 bedroom homes in the neighborhood I wanted to live in. I think this is a tremendous opportunity to really start looking at, holding banks accountable, looking at where the investment's going, use these available lots for development projects in the city of Cleveland, in underserved neighborhoods. We can also look to do more passive green space. More native species of plants. We can plant trees on it. We can make this passive green space. We can do side yard expansion. There are plenty of great ideas that we can do with our vacant and abandoned lots and those homes that need to come down. I forget part 2 of the question.
It was, have you considered raising taxes on the derelict properties?
So it would be great if we could just do that as mayor or as an active council. But that would require a vote, and we would not be permitted to target certain parcels for a higher rate than an adjacent rate. It just, I'd like to say yes because I'm running for office, but I don't want to be disingenuous. It's not how I roll.
Right. Thank you. The next question actually is directed at you, Council President Kelley, at least starting with you. As Council President of City Council for 8 years, why did it take so long for the city to respond to the lead paint crisis that has impacted so many children in Cleveland?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question because we have to understand just how complicated this question is and what tools are really available for the city to attack this. So we know that we have a unacceptable rate of lead poisoning in the city. When this focus came up, the question was, what do we do? Because most of the lead paint, unlike other cities where it's in the water, think Flint, Michigan or others, most of it is in the paint on people's homes, but we don't necessarily regulate that. However, what we were able to do is we found a tool, and the tool is the rental registry and making sure that landlords register their properties. And it was through use of this tool that we set forth the schedule where they needed to require a lead safe certification before making that property available for rent. And again, that seems simple enough, but to make sure that we are finding which homes, because there's no requirement to do so, to find which homes are owner occupied versus rental was, you have to go through billing records, look at where people are paying taxes from. That's not something that was just a computer program away. To be able to make sure that we have the authority to, under Ohio housing law, make sure we can do this. That was cleared. We're able to have this requirement of lead safe. But the biggest problem right now, and everybody who has an opinion about this just needs to be very clear on this, we do not have enough certified lead assessors in the market to deal with all the properties that are required. The Lead Safe Cleveland Coalition that is working together now that we're working with, that we're funding, is the answer. It is the path forward. None of this stuff is easy, but it is something that we are duty bound to do. It's something that we took up. It's something we got done, and we're not gonna stop until we have created a lead safe Cleveland.
Mr. Bibb, what would a Bibb administration do about the complicated issue of lead paint?
Well, I first want to give credit where credit is due to the organizers of Clash and others who finally made the city act on this. And thank God for grassroots heroes because they are the silent heroes that make sure that we are always on the right side of social justice in the city. And as mayor, I want to be a champion for that social justice. Number one, I think we need a lead czar in the administration to work across all of our departments to make sure we can execute on the ordinances that have been executed upon inside City Hall. Secondly, I think we need to do a better job of making sure our building and housing department is structured and managed in a way to make sure we can actually execute the laws that are currently on the books. And then thirdly, if I were mayor, I would have allocated at least $17 to $20 million for matching grant to support the Lead Safe Coalition to finally fund an endowment to eradicate lead paint in this city. There's a great path that Rochester has outlined that we're following here in Cleveland, and we got to build on that work to make sure we can finally eradicate lead paint because it truly is public enemy number one in this city.
Next question is, what initiatives are you most personally excited about implementing if elected?
Council President.
Well, the first thing that I'm personally excited about implementing is making sure that we deploy, finally, we stop talking about digital divide as if it's an academic term, and we really make sure that every resident of Cleveland has a device and broadband access. This is something I've been doing in the community I represent for over 10 years, and I know what works and I know what doesn't work, but I also know the importance of it, the power of it. I am a CMSD dad, and it was shocking. I mean, we knew this problem existed, but when we sent home 38,000 scholars, knowing that 18,000 of them did not have a device or broadband access, that is a crisis to all of us. And it's something that's got to be treated as a crisis. So we cannot move forward as a community until we increase access to opportunity. And the easiest way we do that is through broadband access. Secondly, I am going to be working, I'm already on the Career Pathways Committee for CMSD, but I'm going to continue bringing together education, industry, labor, all those industries that need people, and figure out how do we teach to the jobs that are available. And we need to do that on day one, start that process on day one. Finally, we need to look at, of all of the issues that we're facing, I'm looking forward to starting a Cleveland-based WPA to make sure that Clevelanders are doing the blight elimination. They're doing the solar panel installation. They're doing the public art, that we in addition to spending money on projects, that we don't just bid these out to whomever may respond. We need to make sure that there's a training, that there's a wealth building component in everything that we do. We just have to get things started. We have to focus immediately on what we're going to do to build safer communities, to put community policing in every single district, to make sure that we have foot patrols, bike patrols, community relations committee, an active community service unit on day one. I can't wait to start.
Mr. Bibb, what say you?
Number one, public safety and police reform. I truly believe that safety and trust between our residents and police is the prerequisite to economic opportunity in all of our neighborhoods. That's why I'm supporting issue 24. Now, is it perfect? Absolutely not. But it's a good step in the right direction. And in this case, we cannot let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And this is personal for me. My dad was a cop, and he served this community with pride and dignity. But as a Black man in the city, I know what it's like to have my heart drop when I get pulled over, because I don't know if I'm going to make it home because of my interaction with the police. And so we need to do a better job of bringing more community voices around the table to get policing right in this moment. That's why I want to add a fourth option to 911 around mental health. That's why I want to have social workers and mental health professionals joining our first responders for non-violent 911 calls, because a public safety only lens is not going to suffice in the future. And I think Cleveland can be a national model of getting this right, because now is the time. Secondly, if we can bring back Mount Pleasant, Buckeye, Lee Harvard, that will be an amazing feat, because too many of those parts of our city have not received their fair share. And until we get the Southeast side humming again, I don't believe we will be that city of opportunity in the future. It's going to require more investments to support Black and brown businesses, and more investments to better support those CDCs that finally make sure that all of our neighborhoods can succeed in the future.
The next question is about the city's 15-year tax abatement. And the questioner points out that the city of Cleveland generates payroll tax from some of the recipients of the 15-year tax abatement. And the question is, would you support a proposal to reimburse the city of Cleveland's school district from the city general fund for the amount of the property taxes abated?
Council President.
I'm open to any ideas to support the schools. Tax abatement has been a very useful tool in encouraging development in the city of Cleveland. I think what we really need to do is look at the value of those taxes that are coming in, and also how do we better focus this tool to incent development in other neighborhoods that are not receiving the benefit of tax abatement. You know, it's worked well, but it's outlived its useful life. But maybe Huff, maybe Glenville, maybe Mount Pleasant need full 15, maybe other neighborhoods don't. Maybe they need more. But we really need to look at how we use this tool. And anytime we do a tax increment financing for a project, that is something that we always hold the schools harmless, that the schools will be held harmless when doing tax increment financing. But I'm a CMSD dad, and I'm open to any idea that would better support the Cleveland Public Schools.
I think one thing is very clear based on that question and based on what I've been hearing from voters all across the city is that, you know, for far too long, we've had a one-size-fits-all approach to economic development, and it's clearly not working. And I believe it's time that we, retool and reassess how we deploy our tax abatement policy. I think that policy has been a good step in the right direction and has done some great things for our city. But in many parts of our community, folks are getting displaced and priced out. And so it's time that we truly reevaluate that policy to make sure it's more inclusive and more comprehensive to the local unique needs of all of our neighborhoods, so we can build a path of inclusive economic growth all across our city. And I'm open to any suggestions voters and other key stakeholders might have on how to better do that, while also supporting our local schools.
Next question is, how will you change the culture at City Hall to one of positivity, innovation, and a yes, we can culture?
Why don't we go back to you, Mr. Bibb?
Well, I love this question because culture is everything. As Peter Drucker says, culture eats strategy for lunch. And it's going to be my job, if elected mayor, to set the tone, not only at the top, but to make sure that my commissioners and frontline City Hall employees feel like their voices are being heard. It's important that we have a continuous feedback loop between frontline city employees, middle management staff, and my cabinet, so that information is getting fueled to my administration so we can do the hard work of making sure we're providing high quality basic city services across our city. The other thing I would say is this: as we claw our way out of this pandemic, I think it's time that we truly reimagine how we build the City Hall of the future, because the way City Hall is structured right now is not going to suffice for a post-pandemic Cleveland. And I'm looking forward to working with key community stakeholders and many folks on this call to really design that City Hall of the future to ensure it's structured in a transparent way, but also to ensure that we're recognizing and empowering everybody at City Hall to have a voice, to do their best job, because many of our frontline City Hall employees know some of the most innovative ideas. And it's going to take a mayor who can listen to not only run the city, but to lead the city in the future.
Council President.
Thank you. That starts at the top. That starts with the mayor. That starts with somebody that is intent on getting things done. Somebody that's going to treat every person who walks into City Hall as a partner, as an investor, or just as somebody who needs help, and we are there to help them. That's going to be something that begins on day one, and it's really going to be reflected in the first hires that I have. The first batch of directors, that first cabinet that's set up is going to send a message that every single worker of the city of Cleveland is going to wake up understanding that their job is to help people in the city of Cleveland. It's to help encourage people that want to invest in the city of Cleveland. It's to help people that really need to understand, how our Department of Health works, where are vaccination clinics, where do they get answers? It really is something that it just starts at the top. There's no magic formula. There's no program to bring in. It starts at the top. It's reflected through your hires, and it begins with an absolute appreciation for the 7,500 men and women who work for the city of Cleveland and are the real ambassadors, the true face of the city of Cleveland, those that interface with the public. It's just going to be something that's going to be a basic expectation of everyone's job.
Frank, I'm going to ask the follow-up question of both candidates. Given the need to modernize City Hall, what's your view on talent management and acquisition? Who wants to start?
I'll start. I believe that there is great talent in Cleveland, Ohio, and Northeast Ohio. I think we start there. I think we look to, what do we currently have in government, in the private sector, in the philanthropic community, and who wants to be a part of Cleveland's recovery? Who wants to be a part of the path forward? And that's a starting point, because I'm a believer of, it's better to know, the person, it's better the person have a relationship to start with than to build. That being said, once that happens, then we need to start national searches. Then we need to look for the best and the brightest, the people that are called to do public service. And again, not everybody's called to do public service. You have to understand that you are signing up to make probably less money than you could in the private sector, that you are, signing up to be criticized for allocating a too small amount of resources to greater need, that you will be blamed. But it's part of it. And getting people that are mission driven on serving the city of Cleveland, it is something that it's got to be the calling first and the job second. But I think we achieve that starting locally and then taking a more national approach.
Mr. Bibb, you want to take that question?
As an executive around talent management, you have to do a couple of things. Number one, you got to build a culture that invests in people's strengths, that gives employees a voice to make decisions, and give them the tools they need to be empowered to make decisions. That's critical. I would also say it's important that you hold them accountable, but that you can also hold yourself accountable, because it has to work both ways. And building a continuous culture of strength building and good employee feedback creates improved employee engagement long term. In terms of talent acquisition, there are a number of different community leaders in the private, nonprofit, and public sector that I would love to have in a Bibb administration locally. And then also, I think there's a lot of great experts nationally who could really serve our administration well as we do the hard work of truly creating a modern and engaged City Hall for the 21st century. But I don't need to look too far, because I think there's the next generation of talent right at your school, Dean. And you guys should be a feeding ground for future commissioners and future mayors, if I might say as well, to make sure that we're leveraging that talent to build the next generation of public workforce talent in the city of Cleveland. And that's something I get excited about if elected mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Bibb. Frank, you're back.
Okay.
Thank you.
The next question is about the Right to Counsel program. It's a partnership with Legal Aid in Cleveland to help tenants facing eviction. And it says, what is the long-term funding plan for the Right to Counsel? I may have misstated, Right to Counsel program. And what will Cleveland do to ensure that it is funded by the city of Cleveland so that the funding burden doesn't fall totally on Legal Aid to continue this?
I can take that. Yeah, yes. If I can take that first. That question really strikes at the heart of why Right to Counsel is so important. We've created a burden that falls to the city of Cleveland to meet. Legal Aid is a nonprofit entity, and they cannot be held responsible for this. So that it may fall to the Legal Aid Society of Greater Cleveland, isn't really the issue. The issue is, how might this affect future city of Cleveland budgets? Because we didn't create a program, we guaranteed a right. And that's where it gets challenging. And that's where, we really are going to have to, every future mayor and city council is going to need to rely on their partners at United Way, at Legal Aid, others that can raise funds for these programs. We were very fortunate to have forged a partnership that we did with Legal Aid, with United Way, with the Bar Association, everyone that's involved in the Housing Justice Alliance. And the real value of that is by having United Way take the back office, the training, the payment, everything off of the city of Cleveland, it allowed our money to go directly towards representation of people. But we have to, that is something where we cannot never take our eye off the ball. We can never forget the fact that this is an expensive, essential service. But because we declared it a right, the burden will fall to the city of Cleveland and not Legal Aid, and not United Way. And, whatever private sector partners we have right now, they can go away. That's why it's always incumbent upon us to be massaging this, to be looking for other opportunities to keep this, this program as robust as possible. We should be looking to expand it, not be worried about, what could happen if in a funding crisis. To me, if we don't fund this properly, it's going to lead to bigger, greater financial crises down the road that result from people being placed in eviction, housing insecurity, and everything that goes with putting 90% of our tenants through the legal system without legal representation.
Mr. Bibb?
The first thing that comes to my mind is, can we look at how the Lead Safe Coalition has started to build an endowment funding model as maybe a model to look at for a right to counsel to make sure we can have permanent financing long term. We should look at using some of the American Rescue Plan dollars as a potential investment source for that as well. And then, really getting creative with our other philanthropic partners and also legal and law firm partners in town as well to see if they can better support this work in the city of Cleveland. I know New York has made tremendous strides with this in terms of funding it. And I want to make sure we can put every idea on the table to ensure we can not only, sustain it in its current form, but look at expanding when it makes sense to ensure that those who want eligibility can have broader eligibility around it in the future.
The next question, I'm sorry, please go ahead.
No, we did have time for about one more question. Frank?
Yeah, I do want to mention, just for those who have been submitting questions, I've been asking these in the order in which they've come in, and there are probably at least another dozen more questions that it looks like we're not going to get to. But let me ask this, what looks like the last one. This is about the City of Cleveland's 10-year housing plan, which it's just finishing with hundreds of developers, nonprofits, contractors, real estate professionals, and apartment owners, as well as over 2,000 residents. We're all involved in the process and will be looking for their work to be implemented. As mayor, do you plan to adopt the Cleveland 2030 Equity Housing Plan? And if so, how will you specifically begin implementing the recommendations and identify new funds to ensure the plan's success?
I'll take the first crack at it.
Please take it, Council President.
Thank you. I'll take the first crack at it. Yes, I've been, very involved in watching this develop and looking at who's participating. There's still opportunity to get input in this plan. I am committed to it. I'm committed to the results of it, but it's a bit premature because I don't want to make funding commitments to something that's not a final product yet. And I think that if I were to start picking the pieces of it that I think are going to need funding and be part of it, I'd be assuming that it was done. I'm going to wait for the full recommendation because I want to be respectful of all those people, all those entities that put their time into crafting this program. But, I hope, if nothing else, you remember from this conversation is that housing instability, our housing product, our housing stock is a critical asset in the city of Cleveland. We've got to get this one right. So I'm going to be a very good partner with those that crafted the 10-year housing plan, and I'm going to implement it as it is suggested.
Mr. Bibb?
Yeah, I would also say the current report is in draft form, but I am committed once it's complete to make sure that we build a modern and responsive city hall and a highly effective building and housing department to make sure we can execute, because we're really good at planning things in Cleveland, but we are terrible at execution.
Thank you. Well, we're at the portion of the conversation where we're going to ask the candidates to wrap up with closing statements. And I'm going to ask Justin Bibb to give his closing statement first.
Well, I would just want to say thanks again for hosting this important conversation on housing and community development. As you heard this afternoon, we have some major challenges ahead in our city. And I fundamentally believe that in this time, the voters want and are demanding change because the status quo has gotten us to this point. We all know the data points: poorest big city in America, least connected in terms of access to the internet, the lowest population since the 1800s. But for us to truly, I believe, write that next chapter of prosperity and opportunity, we need bold, dynamic, visionary, but collaborative leadership in the mayor's office. And that's what a Justin Bibb for Mayor campaign is looking to do if elected. And we want to make sure that everyone has a seat at the table to ensure that we can make every neighborhood a neighborhood of opportunity in the future. Thanks again for the time today.
Council President.
Thank you, Dean. Thanks for everybody who's participated on this call today. Again, we've talked about some of the challenges we face in our community as it relates to housing, CRA, rental assistance, projects that can keep people in their homes. And hopefully those that live in Cleveland that will be voting will spend some time looking at what the record that I have had in terms of attacking these issues has been, whether it's something that I have just taken somebody's else or it's something I started new. The programs I talked about today started as council president. I started as council president, and I'm very, very proud of what we've done. But again, despite the challenges that we are facing, we have to understand that our best days lie ahead of us. And if we work together, we can have communities where our workforce, where we have people that are trained and educated, take the jobs that are available, where industry is yearning for people as much as people are yearning for opportunity. We have to understand that we can get to a place where we do not live in a digitally divided community. We can get to a place where your zip code will not determine your life expectancy or your health outcomes. And again, we have to do this together. We have to understand the urgency of this moment, and we have to make sure we have a mayor that is ready to go on day one. And let me finish with this statement to those that live in Cleveland. Look at issue 24 carefully. If this is the critical issue that we're facing, this isn't the letting the perfect get in the way of the good. This isn't good to start with. Look at the progress that we've made under the consent decree. Look at what would happen if we create a civilian board and put them in charge of discipline, if we gave them a budget without accountability. This is an unaccountable board that would be created. We need to take a really close look at that and ask the simple question, would this make our communities more safe or less safe? And consider the officers that we would lose if this would happen, if this would pass. So thank you all very much for your time. I appreciate everything.
Well, I want to thank both candidates. You were well prepared and gave complete answers. I want to thank the Ohio Fair Lending Coalition for putting on this act of democracy. I thought it was just a fabulous session. Mr. Bromley, do you have anything that you would like to say? You have to come off mute, Mr. Bromley.
Sorry, just want to thank both the candidates, Justin and President Kelley. Terrific discussion. I want to thank our planning group again for putting together a most comprehensive set of questions, and you, Dean, for being able to formulate the questions and a fair-minded discussion of these important issues. I grew up in Cleveland. It's a tough town, and hopefully we'll have answers and better days ahead for all. Thank you all again. And thank you. And remember, our annual conference is November 12th. It will be via Zoom again until we get out of the pandemic. So look forward to seeing everybody November 12th. If anybody's interested in being on the conference planning committee, let me know. Okay. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.